The champagne tasted different tonight. I noticed it the moment the bubbles hit my tongue, something slightly bitter beneath the sweetness, a metallic edge that didn't belong in Dom Perignon 2008. But I was 62 years old, had drunk enough champagne in my life to know that sometimes even the best bottles went slightly off, and this was supposed to be a celebration. To family, Simone said, raising her glass. My daughter looked beautiful in the candlelight, her dark skin glowing bronze against the white linen dress she'd worn for dinner. Beside her, Derek smiled that practiced smile he'd perfected, all white teeth and empty warmth. To family, I echoed, taking another sip. The bitterness was stronger this time, but I pushed through it. We were on my yacht, the Artemis, 3 days into a Caribbean cruise that was supposed to rebuild bridges I'd felt crumbling for months. The ocean stretched dark and endless around us, stars overhead so bright they looked close enough to touch. We'd anchored for the night in international waters, far from anything resembling civilization. Just us, the crew asleep below deck, and the kind of isolation that felt romantic in brochures, but suddenly felt different in reality. Mom, you okay? Simone's voice sounded concerned, but her eyes were calculating. I'd seen that look before, in boardrooms when competitors thought they'd found weakness, in intelligence briefings when assets thought they were smarter than their handlers. I'd spent 20 years in naval intelligence before founding Chambers Tech Solutions. I'd survived interrogations, assassination attempts, a kidnapping in Jakarta that left scars I'd never shown my daughter. I'd learned to read people the way other women read romance novels, quickly, thoroughly, looking for the truth beneath performance. And right now, my daughter was performing. Fine, I said, though my vision was starting to blur at the edges. Just tired. It's been a long day. Maybe you should go to bed, Derek suggested. He stood, moved behind my chair, his hands settled on my shoulders. Heavy, possessive. Let us clean up. You've been so good to us this week, taking us on this amazing trip. Let us take care of you for once. 20 years of training screamed warning, but this was my daughter, my only child, the girl I'd raised alone after her father died in a car accident 15 years ago, the woman I'd poured my life into protecting and providing for. Surely I was being paranoid. I stood, and the world tilted. Derek's hands caught me, or appeared to catch me, but I felt him guide my stumble rather than prevent it. Whoa, Mom, Simone said, suddenly beside me. How much have you had to drink? Just the 2 glasses. My words were slurring. That wasn't right. 2 glasses had never affected me like this. Simone, something's wrong. You're just exhausted. Come on, let's get you some air. They guided me to the deck railing. I tried to resist, tried to remember my training, assess the threat, identify exits, maintain awareness, but my body wasn't responding. My legs felt borrowed, my arms heavy as concrete. The ocean air hit my face, cold and sharp. I gripped the railing, trying to clear my head, trying to understand why everything felt so wrong. That's when I heard Derek's voice, low and amused. How long until it kicks in fully? Another minute, Simone answered. Mom, can you hear me? I tried to turn, tried to speak, but my body was shutting down in waves. I managed to nod. If you're watching, please like and subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're from. Good. I want you to hear this. She was close now, her breath warm against my ear. Derek and I have been planning this for 6 months, ever since we realized you were never going to die naturally and leave us what we deserve. $2.1 billion, Mom. That's what you're worth, and we're tired of waiting for our inheritance. No, this wasn't happening. This was my daughter, my baby, the girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd cried on my shoulder when boys broke her heart. The sedative will make this easier, Derek said. He was filming with his phone, I realized dimly, recording this. In a few hours, you'll just slip under the water, painless, peaceful, and we'll tell the Coast Guard you got drunk, fell overboard in the night. Tragic accident. They'll find your body eventually, maybe. Or maybe the sharks will find you first. I tried to scream, tried to fight, but nothing worked. My body was a prison and my daughter held the key. Simone's hands were on my back now, steady and strong. I want you to know something, Mom. This isn't personal. You were a good mother, I guess, but you were also controlling and demanding, and you made me feel like I'd never be good enough. Derek showed me that I deserve more. I deserve your money. I deserve your houses. I deserve everything you built. And she deserves me, Derek added, his voice sick with false affection. Unlike you, I actually appreciate Simone. I don't try to control her life. Later, I'd learned that Derek had a history: 3 prior marriages to wealthy older women, 2 dead in accidents, one who'd escaped with her life but not her fortune. But in that moment, all I knew was that my daughter was pushing me toward the railing and my body refused to fight back. "Say hi to the sharks, Mom," Simone whispered. Then she pushed. The fall felt endless. I hit water that was shockingly cold, felt it close over my head, felt my lungs scream for air I couldn't access. The sedative pulled me down like weights, but some part of me, the part that had survived 20 years of dangerous work, that had built a tech empire from nothing, that had refused to quit even when the world told me I should, that part started fighting. Navy survival training had taught me to function through panic, through pain, through situations where most people would simply give up and die. The sedative made everything harder, made my limbs feel like lead, but I'd operated in worse conditions. I kicked toward the surface, broke through gasping, and heard Derek's laughter carrying across the water. "Swim if you want," he called. "We're 60 miles from the nearest land. Even if the drugs don't get you, the sharks will. Or you'll just get tired and drown. Either way, we win." The yacht's engines roared to life. I watched through blurring vision as the Artemis, my boat, bought with money I'd earned through brilliance and sacrifice, sailed away, taking my daughter and her monster with it. I should have panicked, should have given up, should have let the ocean take me. Instead, I started laughing. Because 10 years ago, after the Jakarta kidnapping, I'd had a GPS tracker surgically implanted in my left shoulder. Military-grade, satellite-linked, monitored 24/7 by my head of security, Marcus Stone, a former Navy SEAL who'd worked for me since I founded the company. And 2 minutes ago, when I'd hit the water, that tracker had sent an automatic distress signal showing my exact coordinates and the fact that I was in the ocean instead of on my yacht. Marcus would already be coordinating rescue, Coast Guard, helicopters, whatever it took. My daughter and her husband thought they'd killed me. They had no idea they'd just made the biggest mistake of their short, greedy lives. I floated on my back, conserving energy, fighting the sedative's pull, and waited for rescue. Above me, stars burned cold and bright, and I smiled. The helicopter's searchlight found me 38 minutes after I hit the water. I'd been counting, one of the tricks they'd taught us in survival school, a way to maintain mental clarity when your body wanted to shut down. 38 minutes of treading water while fighting sedatives designed to knock out a person twice my size. 38 minutes of sharks circling just beyond my sight, drawn by the vibrations of my movement. 38 minutes of watching my yacht disappear into darkness, carrying my daughter and the man who'd orchestrated my murder. If you're watching, please like and subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're from. The water had been surprisingly warm at first, but now I was shaking with cold that had nothing to do with temperature. Shock, maybe, or fury, or the simple animal understanding that I'd just been thrown away like garbage by the person I'd loved most in the world. "Mrs. Chambers!" The voice boomed from above, amplified and urgent. "Hold on, we're coming down!" A rescue basket descended, swaying in the helicopter's downdraft. I grabbed it with hands that barely worked, pulled myself over the edge with the last reserves of strength I had left. The basket jerked upward, and I held on while the ocean fell away beneath me. Strong hands pulled me into the helicopter. I recognized the first face I saw, Marcus Stone, my head of security, his dark face carved with professional calm, but his eyes betraying relief. "Ma'am," he said, wrapping a thermal blanket around my shoulders, "we need to get you to a hospital. You're hypothermic and the tracker showed chemical markers in your bloodstream." "They drugged me," I said through chattering teeth. "Sedatives. In the champagne. We know. Coast Guard is already tracking your yacht. They'll be intercepted within the hour." He pressed a water bottle into my hands. "Drink slowly. You need fluids, but we don't want you vomiting in the helicopter." Beside him sat a woman I didn't recognize, mid-30s, sharp-eyed, wearing a Coast Guard investigator jacket. She leaned forward, her expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Chambers, I'm Special Agent Lisa Mendoza, Coast Guard Investigative Service. I need to ask you some questions about what happened tonight. Are you able to answer, or do you need medical attention first?" "I can answer." The water helped, washing away the bitter residue of whatever Simone had put in my drink. "My daughter and her husband attempted to murder me. They drugged my champagne, waited for the sedatives to take effect, then pushed me overboard. Derek, that's my son-in-law, Derek Hayes, filmed the whole thing on his phone." Agent Mendoza was writing quickly. "Did they say anything? Explain why they were doing this?" Money. My estate is worth approximately $2.1 billion. As my only child, Simone inherits everything if I die. They plan to report my death as an accidental drowning, said I got drunk and fell overboard. Did anyone else witness this? Crew members? They sent the crew below deck after dinner, said we wanted privacy for family time. The irony was bitter as the drugged champagne. It was just the three of us on deck. But they didn't know about your tracker. I smiled slightly. No, they didn't know about a lot of things. Marcus handed his tablet to Agent Mendoza. I've been monitoring Mrs. Chambers since she left port. Here's the timeline. 9:47 p.m. Her tracker shows sudden descent from yacht deck level to sea level. I immediately contacted Coast Guard and initiated private rescue protocols. 9:52 p.m. The yacht's engines started and the vessel began moving away from Mrs. Chambers' position at full speed. They left her to drown, Agent Mendoza said flatly. They left me to die, I corrected. Sharks, drowning, hypothermia. They didn't care which got me first. The helicopter banked, heading toward lights that resolved into Key West. I'd been closer to land than Derek had claimed. Maybe 40 miles. Not 60. Just another lie in an evening full of them. Mrs. Chambers, Agent Mendoza said carefully, attempted murder on the high seas is a federal crime. So is conspiracy to commit murder. If you're willing to press charges, we can arrest them as soon as we intercept the yacht. I'm pressing charges, I said immediately. But I want them to think they got away with it first. Both Marcus and Agent Mendoza looked at me sharply. Explain, Marcus said. I was warming up now. The blanket and the helicopter's heating bringing feeling back to my limbs along with clarity to my thoughts. 20 years of naval intelligence had taught me that the best way to catch enemies wasn't when they were on guard. It was when they thought they'd won. How long until they reach port? I asked. They're heading back to Malibu. At current speed, approximately 6 days, Agent Mendoza said. Perfect. Don't intercept them. Let them think I'm dead. Let them sail home. Dock the yacht. Go back to my house. Let them start celebrating. Start planning how to spend my money. And document everything. I want cameras. I want recordings. I want every incriminating thing they say and do preserved as evidence. You want to watch them celebrate your death, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. I want to give them enough rope to hang themselves. Agent Mendoza, can you coordinate with the FBI? Have them set up surveillance on my Malibu property? I want to know every move they make, every word they speak, every plan they construct. Mrs. Chambers, that's a significant request. We'd need warrants. We'd need probable cause. You have my permission to search my own property. I'll sign whatever you need. And probable cause. They just tried to murder me. You have my testimony. You have the tracker data. And when you intercept that yacht, you'll have Derek's phone with video of him filming my attempted murder. Agent Mendoza was quiet for a moment, thinking it through. Then she smiled, a sharp, predatory expression that reminded me of younger versions of myself. You want to build an airtight case. Give them time to incriminate themselves thoroughly. I want them to bury themselves so deep that no lawyer, no jury, no judge can save them. My daughter tried to kill me for money. Her husband has done this before. I'd bet my fortune on it. And I want to make sure they never, ever have the chance to do it again. The helicopter touched down at Key West Naval Air Station. EMTs were waiting, but I waved them off long enough to grip Marcus's arm. Call Jennifer Ashford, I told him. Jennifer was my attorney, not the corporate lawyers who handled business deals, but the criminal defense attorney I'd kept on retainer since the Jakarta incident. Tell her what happened, and tell her I want a meeting as soon as I'm medically cleared. We have 6 days to build a case that will destroy them. Already done, Marcus said. She's meeting us at the hospital. They loaded me into an ambulance. As we pulled away, I caught a glimpse of the ocean, dark and infinite, the same ocean that was supposed to be my grave. My daughter had whispered, "Say hi to the sharks," like it was a punchline to a joke I didn't understand. But I'd survived sharks before, human ones mostly, in boardrooms and black sites and hostile territories, where being a black woman in naval intelligence made you a target before you'd even spoken. Simone and Derek had no idea what they'd unleashed. They thought they'd killed the woman who'd given Simone life, who'd built an empire, who'd survived everything the world had thrown at her. Instead, they'd just woken up the predator, and predators don't forget. They hunt. The hospital discharged me after 12 hours of observation, IV fluids to flush the sedatives from my system, and a psychological evaluation where I assured the therapist that yes, I understood my daughter had tried to kill me, and no, I wasn't in denial about it. You're remarkably calm, Dr. Patterson had said, her voice carefully neutral behind wire-rimmed glasses. I spent 20 years in naval intelligence, I'd replied. You learn to compartmentalize trauma until you have time to process it properly. Right now, I don't have time. I have a case to build. Jennifer Ashford met me at Marcus's secure apartment in Miami, a place I kept for exactly situations like this, though I'd never imagined situations like this would involve my own daughter. Jennifer was 50-ish, sharp as broken glass, with a reputation for destroying opposing counsel in courtrooms across 3 states. She spread files across the dining table like she was laying out cards for a particularly vicious poker game. Tell me everything, she said. From the beginning. Don't leave out details because you think they're irrelevant. I'll decide what matters. So I did. Described the cruise I'd planned as a peace offering. Simone and I had been distant since her marriage to Derek 2 years ago, and I'd hoped a week together might rebuild what felt increasingly broken. Detailed the champagne that tasted wrong, the way my body had stopped responding the moment my daughter had whispered those words in my ear. Say hi to the sharks, Jennifer repeated, writing it down. That's premeditation. That's malice. That's exactly what we need. There's more, Marcus said. He pulled out his laptop, opened a file. I've been running deep background checks on Derek Hayes since they got engaged. Mrs. Chambers asked me to do it discreetly. I had asked him, because something about Derek had always felt off. The way he'd materialized in Simone's life with no real history, no career to speak of, just charm and good looks and an uncanny ability to say exactly what she wanted to hear. Derek Hayes, Marcus read. Born Derek Hawthorne in London, 1987. Changed his name legally in 2015 after his second wife, Marie Beaumont, died in a sailing accident off the coast of Nice. Jennifer's head snapped up. Second wife? How old is this guy? 38. First wife was Elena Rodriguez, a Spanish hotel heiress. They married when Derek was 23 and she was 61. She died 2 years later in a fall down the stairs of their Madrid apartment. Death ruled accidental, but the investigation noted some inconsistencies, bruises on her arms that suggested she'd been grabbed or restrained before the fall. My stomach turned cold. He has a pattern. Third wife was Isabelle Laurent, French pharmaceutical executive, age 57. They married in 2016. In 2019, she filed for divorce and a restraining order, claiming Derek had become financially controlling and had made veiled threats about accidents that could happen to older women living alone. The divorce was finalized quickly with a substantial settlement. Isabel paid Derek €2 million to go away. She paid him to leave? Jennifer asked. She paid him not to kill her, I said flatly. She figured out what he was and bought her life back. Marcus nodded. Isabel is still alive, living in Paris. I've already reached out through intermediaries. She's willing to testify if needed. That's 3 wealthy older women, Jennifer said, counting on her fingers. Elena dead in suspicious circumstances. Marie dead in a sailing accident. Isabel, who paid him to leave rather than risk becoming number 3. And now Simone has married him to you, a 62-year-old woman worth over $2 billion. Except I'm not some elderly widow he can charm and manipulate, I said. I'm a former intelligence officer with resources and training. I'm a threat. So rather than wait years to inherit, he convinced my daughter to speed up the timeline. How much of this does Simone know? Jennifer asked. About his history? That was the question that had been tearing at me since Marcus pulled me from the ocean. Had my daughter known she was marrying a serial killer? Or was she just a greedy, selfish woman who'd been manipulated by a master predator? I don't know, I admitted. But we're going to find out. Jennifer made notes, her pen moving fast. Here's what we have. Attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud if they try to access your accounts, and possibly multiple homicides if we can connect Derek to Elena's and Marie's deaths. What we need is evidence that Simone knew about Derek's past and proceeded anyway, or evidence that she was the driving force behind the murder attempt. That's where the surveillance comes in, Marcus said. He pulled up another file. This one showing my Malibu mansion, multiple camera angles, all marked as installed within the last 6 hours. FBI put in full coverage while they were still at sea, audio and visual in every room except bathrooms. Everything they say, everything they do, it's being recorded. How did you get authorization so fast? I asked. Special Agent Mendoza made some calls, Marcus said with a slight smile. Turns out the Coast Guard Investigative Service has been looking at Derek for 2 years, ever since French authorities requested assistance with the Marie Beaumont case. They just didn't have enough evidence to move forward. Your case gives them the opening they need. So this isn't just about me, I said slowly. This is about stopping a serial predator. Yes, Jennifer confirmed, which means the FBI is very interested in making sure this case is airtight. They want Derek Hayes in prison for the rest of his life, and they want to use your case to reopen investigations into the deaths of Elena Rodriguez and Marie Beaumont. I thought about those women, elderly, wealthy, probably lonely like I'd been after my husband died. They'd let Derek into their lives, into their hearts, into their bank accounts, and he'd killed them for it. When do Simone and Derek dock in Malibu? I asked. 4 days, Marcus said. The Artemis is currently 300 miles offshore, making good time. They'll arrive Thursday afternoon, and I want to be there when they walk into my house, I said. I want to see their faces when they realize I'm not dead. I want them to understand exactly how badly they miscalculated. Mrs. Chambers? Jennifer started carefully. I understand the desire for confrontation, but from a legal standpoint, I'm the victim of attempted murder, and I have every right to confront my attempted murderers in my own home, especially when that home is fully surveilled and the FBI will be recording every word. Jennifer studied me for a long moment. You want to make them confess on camera. I want to give them enough rope to hang themselves, just like I did in intelligence work. Let the target think they're safe. Let them reveal their plans, their methods, their accomplices. Then close the trap when you have everything you need. It's risky, Marcus warned. If Derek realizes you're alive before we're ready, he could run. He has money, connections, fake identities probably lined up. He won't run, I said with certainty, because he thinks he's won. He thinks I'm dead and buried at sea and all that money is about to be his. His arrogance will keep him right where we want him. Jennifer smiled, sharp and predatory. All right, we do this your way. But I want FBI in the house with you. I want panic buttons, and I want the arrest warrant signed and ready to execute the moment we have what we need. Agreed, I said. We spent the next 3 days preparing. Jennifer coordinated with FBI and Coast Guard investigators. Marcus ran additional background on Derek, uncovering shell companies, offshore accounts, and a pattern of financial manipulation that stretched back 15 years. And I watched surveillance footage from the yacht, unable to look away from the evidence of my daughter's betrayal. The night after they pushed me overboard, Simone and Derek had celebrated with champagne on the deck where I'd almost died. The audio was crystal clear. Do you think the sharks got her? Simone asked, her voice slurred with alcohol and something that might have been guilt or might have been excitement. Who cares? Derek replied. Either way, she's dead, and we're rich. $2.1 billion, baby. We can buy anything we want, go anywhere. Be anyone. My mom's lawyers will ask questions, though, about the accident. Let them ask. We were sleeping. We woke up. She was gone. Tragic loss. You're devastated. I'm supportive. We collect the inheritance and live happily ever after. What about her security guy? Marcus. What about him? He works for your mom. When your mom's dead, he's unemployed. He'll take his severance and disappear. You're sure this will work? Baby, I've done this before. Trust me. The recording ended. Jennifer looked at me, her expression grim. He just confessed to prior murders on tape, and Simone didn't even question it, I said quietly. She knew. Maybe not about the specific women, but she knew he'd done this before. That was the worst part. Not that my daughter had tried to kill me, but that she'd known she was in partnership with a murderer and had chosen him anyway. Chosen money over morality, wealth over her own mother's life. Are you going to be okay seeing her? Marcus asked gently. When they arrive? I touched the place on my shoulder where the GPS tracker sat embedded under skin, the device that had saved my life, that had turned would-be murderers into surveilled criminals. I survived 20 years of intelligence work, I said. Survived being waterboarded in training, survived a kidnapping, survived being thrown into the ocean by my own daughter. Yes, Marcus. I'm going to be okay. Better than okay. Why's that? I smiled, and it felt cold and sharp as the ocean that had tried to claim me. Because in 4 days, I'm going to watch my daughter's world collapse, and I'm going to make sure she understands exactly who she tried to kill. Thursday morning, I flew back to Malibu. It was time to come back from the dead. The FBI set up in my home like they were staging for war. Special Agent Carmen Rodriguez led the team, a woman in her 40s with ex-military bearing and eyes that cataloged everything. She walked through my mansion room by room, identifying surveillance camera locations, planning positions for agents, discussing contingencies if Derek became violent. Mrs. Chambers, she said as we stood in my living room overlooking the Pacific, I need you to understand the risk here. Derek Hayes is suspected in 2 murders and 1 attempted murder that we know of. He's dangerous, he's desperate, and when he realizes you're alive, he may react unpredictably. I understand, I said, but Agent Rodriguez, I didn't survive what I survived to let him intimidate me now. This is my house. My money he tried to steal. My life he tried to end. I'm taking it all back. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. But you'll wear a wire. You'll have agents in adjacent rooms, and the moment I give the signal, you step back and let us take over. Agreed. They wired me like I was going undercover, which, in a way, I was. Microphone taped to my chest. Transmitter hidden in my waistband. Earpiece so small I could barely feel it nestled in my ear canal. Test, Agent Rodriguez said from the kitchen. Receiving, I confirmed. Marcus arrived at noon with updates. The Artemis docked an hour ago. Derek and Simone are currently at the marina dealing with customs and inspections. Coast Guard is being thorough, making them wait, asking questions, creating delays. Should give us another 2 hours before they head here. Perfect, I said. That gives me time to set the scene. I'd thought carefully about this, about what would have the maximum psychological impact when Simone and Derek walked through my door expecting an empty house and found me instead. I wanted them off balance, shocked, terrified. So I had the dining room set for 3. Fine china, crystal glasses, expensive champagne chilling in a bucket, the same brand Derek had drugged 5 nights ago. And at the head of the table, a gift-wrapped box. What's in it? Marcus asked. I smiled. You'll see. At 2:47 p.m., my security system pinged. Simone's car, technically my car, a Mercedes I'd bought her for her birthday last year, was approaching the gate. They're here, Agent Rodriguez said into her mic. All units. Positions. FBI agents disappeared into bedrooms, closets, hallways. I could hear them breathing through my earpiece, could feel their presence like ghosts in my own home. I sat at the dining table, perfectly composed, and waited. The front door opened. I heard Simone's voice, light and carefree. God, it feels good to be home. I'm exhausted from that boat. Derek, can you grab the bags? In a minute, babe. I need a drink first. Footsteps in the foyer, the rustle of bags being dropped. Then Simone appeared in the dining room doorway, and her face went from relaxed to horrified in a single, satisfying second. Hi, baby, I said quietly. Did you miss me? She screamed. High-pitched, raw, genuine terror. Derek came running, stopped dead when he saw me, his handsome face going pale as chalk. No, he whispered. You're dead. We watched you. You drowned. Clearly not, I said, though not for lack of trying on your part. Please sit down. I've prepared a homecoming dinner. This isn't real, Simone said, her voice shaking. This is... Mom, how are you... How am I alive? Well, that's an interesting story. You see, 10 years ago, I was kidnapped in Jakarta, spent 3 days in a warehouse with a gun to my head before Navy SEALs extracted me. After that, I had a GPS tracker surgically implanted. I touched my left shoulder, right here, satellite-linked, monitored 24/7 by my security team. So when you pushed me into the ocean, Marcus knew my exact location within seconds. Rescue helicopter had me out of the water in 38 minutes. Derek's eyes were darting, calculating exits, options, escape routes. But I saw Agent Rodriguez shift position in my peripheral vision. He wouldn't make it 3 steps before FBI tackled him. Mom, Simone tried, her voice taking on a pleading tone I remembered from childhood when she'd been caught doing something wrong. It wasn't... We didn't mean to drug my champagne? Didn't mean to push me overboard? Didn't mean to sail away while I drowned? I stood, walked slowly toward her. Tell me, Simone, which part was accidental? We thought... Derek said you were going to cut me out of your will. He said you were changing everything to charity, that I'd get nothing when you died. We panicked. I wasn't changing my will, I said flatly. That was a lie Derek told you, just like I'm sure he told you many lies. Shut up, Derek snapped at me, finding his voice. You don't know anything about our relationship. I know you killed your second wife in Nice. I know your first wife died in suspicious circumstances in Madrid. I know your third wife paid you 2 million euros to leave rather than risk becoming your next victim. And I know you planned to do the same thing to Simone once you'd gotten access to my money. Simone's head whipped toward Derek. What is she talking about? She's lying, Derek said. She's trying to turn you against me. I have documentation, I said. Death certificates, police reports, divorce filings. Derek Hawthorne, also known as Derek Hayes, Professional con artist and serial murderer of wealthy older women. You were just his latest mark, Simone, and I was supposed to be your joint project, the big score that would set you both up for life. That's not true, Simone whispered, but her eyes said she was starting to believe it. There's more, I continued. Want to know how I know? Because the FBI has been recording everything you've said and done since you docked the yacht. Every conversation, every celebration, every detail of your plan to spend my money, including the part where Derek told you he'd done this before. Derek moved then, fast and desperate, lunging toward me. But Agent Rodriguez was faster. She emerged from the hallway with 3 other agents, guns drawn. Derek Hayes, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and fraud. Get on the ground now. He didn't comply. Instead, he grabbed Simone, pulled her in front of him like a shield. I'll hurt her, he said. I swear You'll what? I asked coldly. Kill her like you were always planning to anyway? We heard that conversation too, Derek. The one where you told your accomplice in London that you'd eliminate Simone once the money was secured. The same way you eliminated Marie Beaumont. Simone made a sound like a wounded animal. Derek? It wasn't supposed to be like this, Derek said, and for the first time I heard genuine panic in his voice. We were supposed to be rich. We were supposed to win. You tried to kill the wrong woman, I said. I survived wars, survived kidnapping, survived 20 years of intelligence work in places that would have broken you in a day. You thought I was just some rich old lady you could dispose of, but I'm Victoria Chambers. I built an empire from nothing, and you're just another predator who miscalculated badly. Agent Rodriguez moved in, along with 2 other agents. They separated Derek from Simone with practiced efficiency, forcing him to the ground, cuffing him. He was screaming obscenities, threatening lawsuits, claiming innocence. Simone just stood there, her face streaked with tears, looking at me like she didn't know who I was anymore. Maybe she never had. Simone Carter, Agent Rodriguez said, you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. As they read her rights, Simone kept staring at me. Mom, she whispered. Mom, please. I'm your daughter. You were my daughter, I said quietly, until you decided my life was worth less than my money. They led her away in handcuffs. Derek went first, still screaming threats and denials. Simone went quietly, broken, her designer dress crumpled and her face aged 10 years in 10 minutes. When the house was finally silent, when the FBI had processed the scene and left with their prisoners, I walked to the dining room table and picked up the gift-wrapped box I'd placed at the head. Marcus appeared in the doorway. What is it? I opened the box and showed him. Inside was a shark tooth, massive, prehistoric, mounted on velvet. I'd bought it from a marine antiquities dealer yesterday. A little joke, I said. They told me to say hi to the sharks. I thought I'd return the favor. Marcus didn't laugh, neither did I. Are you okay? He asked. I looked out at the Pacific Ocean, the same ocean that was supposed to be my grave, watched the waves roll in eternal and indifferent, neither mourning my death nor celebrating my survival. I will be, I said, eventually. But that evening, alone in my house that felt enormous and empty, I allowed myself to grieve. Not for Simone, the woman who'd pushed me into dark water, but for the child she'd been, the little girl who used to run to me with scraped knees and big dreams, who'd believed her mother could fix anything. That child was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. And maybe that was the real death that had happened on the Artemis that night. Not my death, but the death of the illusion that family meant loyalty, that love meant safety, that being a mother guaranteed anything at all. But I'd survived worse deaths before. I'd survived this one too. The interrogations began the morning after the arrest. I wasn't allowed in the room. Witness protocol, Jennifer explained. But I watched through one-way glass as FBI agents systematically dismantled Derek's defenses. Special Agent Rodriguez led the questioning, her voice professionally neutral while her eyes catalogued every micro-expression, every tell. Mr. Hayes? Or should I say Mr. Hawthorne? She slid a folder across the table. Let's talk about Elena Rodriguez. Derek's face went carefully blank. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Because we have marriage certificates, bank records, and death certificates. Elena Rodriguez, age 61, Spanish hotel heiress. You married her in 2010. She died in 2012 from a fall down the stairs of your Madrid apartment. You inherited 17 million euros. That was an accident. The investigation cleared me. The investigation noted suspicious bruising on her arms, bruising consistent with being grabbed and thrown. Rodriguez pulled out photographs, autopsy reports, crime scene photos, but you had a good lawyer and no witnesses, so they ruled it accidental, and you walked away rich. Derek said nothing, but I saw his jaw tighten. Then there's Marie Beaumont, Rodriguez continued, your second wife, age 59, French pharmaceutical executive, married in 2015, dead in 2017 in a sailing accident off Nice, 42 million euros inherited. I loved Marie. Her death destroyed me. Destroyed you enough to remarry 18 months later to Isabelle Laurent, who, smartly, divorced you and paid you to disappear. She's still alive, by the way, living in Paris. Very willing to testify about the threats you made, the way you isolated her from friends and family, the way you discussed accidents that happen to older women who get in the way. That's her word against mine. Except we have recordings now, Rodriguez said, from the yacht, where you told Simone Carter you'd done this before, where you admitted to your accomplice in London that you planned to eliminate Simone once you had access to Victoria Chambers' fortune. Want to hear them? She played the audio. Derek's voice, clear and damning. Baby, I've done this before. Trust me. His face drained of color. Here's what we know, Derek. You're a serial predator who targets wealthy older women, marries them, kills them, and inherits their money. You've done it at least twice, possibly 3 times. And you were caught attempting it a 4th time with Victoria Chambers. The difference is, Mrs. Chambers survived. And she's very, very motivated to make sure you never hurt anyone again. In the adjacent interrogation room, Simone was having a different conversation. Her interrogator was younger, a woman named Agent Lisa Park, who specialized in getting confessions from accomplices. Simone, I need you to understand your situation, Park said gently. You pushed your mother off a yacht with the intent to kill her. That's attempted murder, federal offense. You're looking at 25 years minimum. Simone was crying, had been crying since they brought her in. I didn't want to. Derek said it was the only way. The only way to what? To get what I deserved. My mom, she controlled everything. My whole life, she made all the decisions. Where I went to school, who I dated, what career I pursued. Even after I was an adult, she was always there. Always managing me. Derek was the first person who made me feel like I could make my own choices. So you chose to murder her. I chose to be free. Simone's voice rose. Do you know what it's like having Victoria Chambers as a mother? Perfect Victoria, who built a billion-dollar company, who was a Navy intelligence officer, who survived kidnappings and wars and everything. How do you compete with that? How do you ever be good enough? So this was about jealousy. This was about wanting my own life. And Derek showed me how we could have it. Park leaned back. Simone, did you know Derek has killed before? That's not... He said those were accidents. He told you about Elena and Marie? A long pause. He mentioned he'd been married before, that his wives had died. But he said they were accidents. Freak occurrences. He said people thought he'd done something wrong, but he hadn't. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. He loved me. He understood me. He said we deserved better than waiting for my mother to die naturally. Park slid a photograph across the table. Elena Rodriguez, vibrant and smiling at her wedding to a young Derek. This woman was 61 when she married a 23-year-old man she thought loved her. 2 years later, she was dead, pushed down the stairs with enough force to break her neck. Another photo. Marie Beaumont, drowned during a sailing trip with her husband, the man who was supposed to protect her. Simone stared at the photos, her face crumbling. Derek Hayes is a serial killer, Simone, and you helped him try to kill again. The question now is whether you're a victim he manipulated or a willing accomplice. Your testimony determines which. What do you want me to do? Tell us everything. How Derek approached you, how he convinced you to participate, what he said about his plans for after your mother's death. Everything. If I testify against him, will they reduce my sentence? That depends on what you give us and how helpful you are. But Simone, understand this. With or without your cooperation, we're putting Derek Hayes in prison for the rest of his life. The only question is how long you join him. I watched my daughter wrestle with the choice, loyalty to the man who'd used her, or honesty that might save some portion of her life. Finally, she spoke. It started 8 months after we got married. Over the next 6 hours, Simone detailed everything, how Derek had slowly isolated her from friends, from support systems that might have questioned his influence, how he'd planted seeds about my controlling nature, my wealth, how unfair it was that I held everything while Simone had to ask permission for money, how he'd suggested, almost casually, that accidents happened to wealthy older women all the time. He made it sound reasonable, Simone said, her voice hollow. Like we were just accelerating what would happen eventually anyway. Like we deserve to be happy now instead of waiting decades for inheritance. Did he tell you he planned to kill you too? Park asked. Simone's head snapped up. What? Park played another recording. Derek's voice, speaking to someone on his phone while Simone was below deck. Once we have the money secured and transferred offshore, I'll handle Simone the same way I handled the others. Make it look like suicide, maybe. Grief over her mother's death. 2 birds, 1 yacht. The color drained from Simone's face. He was going to kill me. Yes. You were never his partner, Simone. You were his tool, a way to access a bigger fortune than he'd ever scored before. And once you'd served your purpose, you'd have been eliminated just like Elena and Marie. My daughter put her head in her hands and sobbed. Not the performative crying she'd done earlier, but genuine, broken sounds of someone realizing they'd been used. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt tired. Jennifer found me in the observation room an hour later. We have enough, she said. Derek's being charged with 2 counts of murder for Elena and Marie, 1 count of attempted murder for you, conspiracy, fraud, and about a dozen other charges. He'll die in prison. And Simone? She's cooperating fully, testifying against Derek, providing details about his operation, his contacts, his methods. In exchange, the DA is offering 15 years with possibility of parole after 12. That's generous. She was manipulated by a professional predator. The jury will have sympathy. And honestly, Simone's testimony is crucial for closing the cases on Elena and Marie. Their families deserve justice too. I thought about 2 women I'd never met, who'd died believing the man they loved truly loved them back, who'd never known they were just entries in a ledger, fortunes to be liquidated. What happens now? I asked. Pre-trial proceedings start next month, trial probably in 6 to 8 months. You'll need to testify, detail the assault, the drugging, being pushed overboard. Can you do that? Yes, I said without hesitation. I can do that, because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Elena and Marie and Isabel and every other woman who'd been targeted by men who saw aging, wealth, and loneliness as vulnerability rather than the earned rewards of a life fully lived. Derek had chosen the wrong victim, and now he'd face every consequence of that choice. The trial began on a gray March morning, 6 months after Simone pushed me into the Pacific. The federal courthouse in Los Angeles was grand and imposing, designed to make people feel the weight of justice. I walked in wearing Armani and certainty, flanked by Marcus and Jennifer, and I refused to look intimidated. Derek sat at the defense table looking smaller than I remembered. Orange jumpsuit instead of designer clothes, hands cuffed, the glamour stripped away to reveal the predator underneath. His attorney, a high-priced defender named Malcolm Price, had his work cut out for him. The evidence was overwhelming. Simone sat separately, having taken her plea deal. She'd testify for the prosecution, part of the bargain that might let her see freedom again before she was elderly. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. Agent Rodriguez testified about the investigation, the rescue, the surveillance. They played audio recordings of Derek celebrating my death, discussing his prior murders, planning to eliminate Simone. The jury, 8 women and 4 men, ranging in age from 25 to 73, listened with expressions that shifted from shock to disgust to fury. On day 3, I took the stand. The prosecutor, Linda Soto, walked me through my background: naval intelligence, founding Chambers Tech, selling for billions, raising Simone alone after my husband's death, establishing who I was before establishing what had been done to me. Mrs. Chambers, Soto said gently, can you tell the jury what happened on the evening of September 15th? I took a breath and told them everything. The champagne that tasted wrong, the sedatives taking effect, my body failing me, Simone's hands on my back, her whispered words, the cold shock of ocean water closing over me. What went through your mind when you hit the water? Soto asked. I thought about my daughter, I said honestly, about how the girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms had just thrown me to the sharks. And then I thought about surviving, because I didn't spend 62 years building a life just to let it end that way. Did you believe you would survive? I knew I had a chance. I had survival training. I had the GPS tracker. I had Marcus monitoring me. But yes, For a few minutes while I was treading water waiting for rescue, I thought I might die, and I was angry about it. Furious that my daughter and her husband thought they could erase me like I was nothing. Malcolm Price cross-examined me aggressively, trying to suggest I was exaggerating, that perhaps the fall was accidental, that maybe I'd misunderstood Simone's intentions. Mrs. Chambers, isn't it true you've been controlling of your daughter her entire life? I've been involved in my daughter's life, I corrected, as parents are. Isn't it true you disapproved of her marriage to Derek Hayes? I had concerns about a man with no career, no visible means of support, who appeared in my daughter's life and immediately began influencing her to distance herself from me. Yes. So you were jealous of their relationship. I was concerned about predatory behavior. Turns out I was right. Several jurors smiled. Price's face reddened. Isn't it convenient that you had this GPS tracker that saved your life? Almost like you were expecting trouble? I had the tracker because I was kidnapped in Jakarta 10 years ago, I said coldly. Spent 3 days believing I'd be executed. After that, I took precautions. Not because I expected my daughter to murder me, but because I'd learned that assuming safety is how you end up dead. Price backed off after that. Simone testified on day 5. She looked hollow, aged, wearing the cheap clothes they'd given her in county jail. She described how Derek had seduced her, isolated her, convinced her that murdering me was justified. Did you want your mother dead? Soto asked. I wanted to be free of her, Simone said quietly. I wanted my own life, my own money, my own choices. Derek made it seem like killing her was the only way to achieve that. Do you regret your actions? Every day, every moment. I don't expect my mother to forgive me. I don't even expect her to understand. But I need everyone to know what Derek and I did was evil, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to understand how I became someone capable of that. She looked at me then, her eyes pleading for something I couldn't give. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The defense called character witnesses for Derek, people who swore he was charming, kind, incapable of violence. But the prosecution destroyed them with facts. Bank records showing Derek had systematically drained his wife's accounts, emails discussing eliminating obstacles, testimony from Isabelle Laurent about Derek's threats. Isabelle flew in from Paris specifically to testify. She was elegant, 70 now, with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. Mr. Hayes told me that accidents happen to women who don't cooperate, she said in accented English. He said his previous wives had learned that lesson too late. I believed him, so I paid him 2 million euros to leave, because I valued my life more than my money. Why didn't you go to the police? Soto asked. Because I had no proof, just threats and implications, and I was afraid. But when I heard about Mrs. Chambers, about what he'd tried to do, I knew I had to speak. For her, for Marie, for Elena, for all of us. The jury deliberated for 9 hours over 2 days. When they filed back in, every one of them looked at Derek with contempt. On the charge of attempted murder, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder? Guilty. 17 charges, 17 guilty verdicts. Derek's face went white. His attorney patted his shoulder, but there was nothing to be done. The evidence had been overwhelming. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. I gave a victim impact statement that was brief and precise. Derek Hayes is a predator who has destroyed lives and families for personal gain. He deserves no mercy, no second chance, no possibility of ever harming another person. I ask this court to ensure that he dies in prison, alone, forgotten, which is exactly what he tried to make happen to me, and succeeded in making happen to 2 other women. Judge Patricia Monroe sentenced him to life without parole on the attempted murder charge alone, with consecutive sentences on the other counts. Mr. Hayes, she said, you represent the worst of humanity. Someone who manipulates trust, exploits love, and destroys lives for money. You will never walk free again. Derek was led away in chains. He looked at me once as they took him out, and what I saw in his face was rage. Not remorse, not shame, just fury that he'd been caught. Good. Let him spend the rest of his life angry. Simone's sentencing was separate, quieter. 15 years in a federal facility. Possibility of parole after 12 if she demonstrated rehabilitation. Ms. Carter, Judge Monroe said, you were manipulated by a master predator, but you still made choices. You still pushed your mother into the ocean. You still celebrated her death. Those actions have consequences. Simone nodded, accepting her fate. As they led her away, she looked at me one last time. Mom? I looked back but said nothing. There were no words for what lay between us now. Too much damage, too much betrayal, too much truth. Maybe someday I'd visit her in prison. Maybe someday I'd find some form of forgiveness. But not today. Today, I walked out of that courthouse into California sunshine, alive and vindicated and free. And Derek Hayes would never see sunlight as a free man again. 3 months after Derek's sentencing, I flew to Paris. The French authorities had reopened Marie Beaumont's case based on evidence from my trial, and they'd asked me to testify at their proceedings. More than that, Marie's family had asked to meet me, the woman who'd survived what their daughter, sister, aunt couldn't. I checked into a small hotel in the Marais, jet-lagged and uncertain. Marcus had offered to come with me, but I'd declined. This was something I needed to do alone. Marie's sister, Genevieve Beaumont, met me at a café near the Panthéon. She was in her 60s, elegant in the effortless way French women manage, with Marie's eyes and a grief that sat heavy in her face. "Madame Chambers," she said, her English careful and precise. "Thank you for coming, for testifying, for surviving. I wish I could have saved your sister," I said quietly. "You could not. None of us could. But you stopped him from killing again. That is something." She pulled out photographs. This was Marie, before Derek. The woman in the photos was vibrant, laughing, successful, CEO of a pharmaceutical company, award-winning researcher, devoted aunt to Genevieve's children. She met him at a charity gala, Genevieve said. He was young, handsome, attentive. She was lonely. Her husband had died 3 years before, and she hadn't dated since. Derek made her feel alive again, feel desired. How long before he killed her? 2 years. Long enough to get fully into her accounts, to establish himself legally as her husband, to isolate her from friends who might ask questions. Then they went sailing for their anniversary. Only Derek came back. What did he tell you happened? That she'd been drinking, that she'd gone up on deck alone while he was below, that when he came up she was gone. The Coast Guard found her body 3 days later, drowned. Derek inherited 42 million euros and disappeared within 2 months. Did you suspect? Everyone suspected, but we had no proof. Derek had been careful. No witnesses, no evidence of violence, nothing but terrible coincidence. Until you. The French trial was briefer than the American one, but no less damning. The prosecution presented evidence from Derek's conviction in the U.S., testimony from Isabel about his patterns, and new forensic analysis of Marie's death that suggested she'd been drugged before drowning, just like Derek had drugged me. The methodology is identical, the prosecutor explained to the French court. Sedatives in alcohol, waiting for the victim to become incapacitated, then creating circumstances that look accidental. In Marie Beaumont's case, he pushed her overboard while she was unconscious and claimed she'd gone up alone. Derek wasn't present. He was in American prison, but he was convicted in absentia of murder. A symbolic victory, perhaps, but one that meant everything to Marie's family. After the verdict, Genevieve took me to Marie's grave in Père Lachaise Cemetery. We stood together in October chill, looking at the headstone that said simply, Marie Beaumont, 1960-2017, beloved sister and scientist. She would have liked you, Genevieve said quietly. You are what she was. Strong, brilliant, independent. Derek chose his victims well. He found women who'd built empires, who'd survived on their own strength, women he thought he could break. But he underestimated us. He underestimated you, the rest of us. We were not as lucky. I thought about Elena in Madrid, about Marie here in Paris, about Isabel who'd bought her life with millions, about all the women who'd loved and trusted and paid for it with everything. I'm starting a foundation, I said, to help protect older women from predators like Derek. Investigation services, legal support, education about warning signs. I'd like to do it in Marie's name, if your family would approve. Genevieve's eyes filled with tears. She would be honored. Before I left Paris, I met with Interpol investigators who were now looking into Derek's movements over the past 15 years. Turned out there were other women, potential victims in Italy, Germany, even Australia, who'd had relationships with men matching Derek's description and methodology. We believe he's been doing this since his early 20s. The lead investigator told me. Dozens of victims, potentially. Some who died, some who escaped, some we'll never find because they were too afraid or ashamed to report. How many deaths are you investigating? 7 confirmed, 3 more suspicious, and at least 12 women who paid him to leave like Madame Laurent, but never filed formal complaints. 7 confirmed murders. My daughter had helped attempt the 8th. The weight of that sat heavy as I flew back to Los Angeles. 7 families destroyed, 7 women who'd died thinking they were loved, 7 fortunes stolen by a man who saw human life as nothing more than a transaction, but he'd been stopped. Finally, definitively stopped. And maybe, just maybe, the foundation I was building would prevent future Derricks from finding future victims. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough, but it was something. 6 months after Derrick's conviction, I stood in a renovated office building in downtown Los Angeles and watched workers install the sign, the Marie Beaumont Chambers Foundation for Elder Safety. Marcus stood beside me, reviewing security protocols on his tablet. We've had 47 applications for assistance in the first week alone, mostly women over 55 who suspect their partners or family members of financial manipulation. Can we handle that volume? We've hired 8 investigators, 4 attorneys, 2 financial forensic analysts, and a victim advocate. Jennifer's overseeing the legal department. We're ready. The foundation had become my purpose, the thing that transformed my survival from personal victory into something that could help others. I'd funded it with $500 million from my fortune, enough to operate indefinitely and provide free services to women who needed them. Our mission was simple: investigate romantic partners and family members who showed predatory patterns, provide legal representation for victims, offer emergency relocation and financial protection services, and educate women about warning signs of financial and physical abuse. The first case we took changed everything. Her name was Patricia Reeves, 73, a retired accountant from San Diego, whose boyfriend of 2 years had convinced her to add him to her bank accounts. Within 6 months, $400,000 had vanished. When Patricia questioned it, he'd become threatening. Our investigators traced the money to offshore accounts the boyfriend controlled, discovered he had a history of targeting older women, and helped Patricia file criminal charges and recover most of her funds. The boyfriend was currently serving 5 years for elder financial abuse. Patricia sent me a letter afterward. "You saved my life, not just my money, my life." I was ready to give up, to accept that this was just what happened to old women who were foolish enough to trust. But you showed me I deserved better. Thank you. Stories like Patricia's multiplied. Every week brought new cases. Some we could help, some where we arrived too late. All of them breaking my heart and strengthening my resolve. We also partnered with law enforcement agencies worldwide. Interpol, FBI, Coast Guard Investigative Service. All of them now had direct lines to our research department. When they encountered potential elder abuse cases, we provided resources, investigative support, and victim services. The Foundation's public face was educational. We created programs teaching women how to protect their assets, how to recognize manipulation, how to conduct background checks on romantic partners. We worked with banks to flag suspicious account activity. We lobbied for stronger elder protection laws. But the private work, the investigations, the rescues, the cases where we extracted women from dangerous situations, that was what drove me. One afternoon, Marcus brought me a file. "You should see this." Inside was a photograph of a man in his 40s, charming and handsome, at a charity event in Miami. Beside him, a wealthy widow in her 60s, beaming. "Who is he?" "Anthony Corso, Italian national, moved to the U.S. 5 years ago. He's engaged to Margaret Sullivan, retired real estate developer. Net worth $80 million. Margaret's daughter contacted us worried about the relationship. What's the concern? Corso fits Derrick's profile. Significantly younger, no visible income, met her at a vulnerable time, moving fast toward marriage. And get this, he was questioned but never charged in the death of a wealthy older woman in Rome 7 years ago." My hands tightened on the file. Another one, Marcus confirmed. "Question is, what do we do about it? We investigate. Thoroughly. And if he's what we think he is, we stop him before Margaret becomes his next victim." It took 3 weeks of investigation to build the case. Corso had left a trail across Europe, 2 dead wives, 3 who'd paid him to leave, a pattern of financial manipulation and veiled threats. We documented everything and presented it to Margaret along with her daughter. Margaret had been resistant at first. Corso loved her, she insisted. He wasn't after her money. But when faced with proof of his history, with photographs of women who looked just like her, with bank records showing how he'd systematically isolated and controlled them, she'd broken down crying. "I thought I was special," she'd whispered. "I thought he saw me. He saw your bank account. I'd replied gently. But Margaret, you deserve someone who sees you. And that person is not a predator with a history of murdering wealthy women. Margaret had broken off the engagement. Corso had been arrested when he tried to access accounts he'd convinced Margaret to give him access to. He was currently fighting extradition to Italy, where authorities wanted him for murder. Another predator stopped. Another woman saved. The work was exhausting and endless, and exactly what I needed. Dr. Kim, the therapist I'd been seeing since the trial, said I was using the foundation to process my trauma by preventing others from experiencing similar pain. Maybe she was right, but if so, it was healthy trauma processing, turning my worst experience into protection for others. Have you thought about visiting Simone? Dr. Kim asked during one session. I'd been dreading that question. No, it's been almost 2 years. She's written you what, 20 letters? 23. I'd received them but never opened them. They sat in a drawer in my home office, testimony to a relationship I didn't know how to repair or if I even wanted to. I'm not ready, I said. Will you ever be ready? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Forgiveness isn't about her, Victoria. It's about you, carrying that anger, that hurt. It's weight you don't need to bear. The anger fuels the foundation. The hurt reminds me why this work matters. And when the foundation is running smoothly and you've helped hundreds of women, what then? You'll still be carrying a daughter-shaped hole in your heart. I'd left that session angry, frustrated that Dr. Kim couldn't understand. But late that night, alone in my Malibu house that still felt too big and too empty, I'd pulled out one of Simone's letters. The envelope was worn from handling, postmarked from the federal facility in Dublin, California. I'd held it for an hour before finally opening it. Dear Mom, I know you probably won't read this. I know I don't deserve for you to read it, but I need to write it anyway. Need to try to explain even though I know there's no explanation that makes what I did acceptable. I was jealous of you. Jealous of your success, your strength, your certainty. I spent my whole life feeling like I'd never measure up to Victoria Chambers, brilliant intelligence officer, tech CEO, woman who built empires while raising a daughter alone. I was just Simone, ordinary and forgettable, living in your shadow. Derek made me feel seen. He told me I was special, that I deserved more than waiting for scraps of your attention. He convinced me that you were holding me back, that your money should be mine. And I wanted to believe him because believing him meant I wasn't the problem. You were, but you weren't the problem. I was. My jealousy, my insecurity, my willingness to believe a predator who told me what I wanted to hear. I tried to kill my mother for money I didn't even need, for freedom I already had if I'd been brave enough to claim it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to ever speak to me again. But Mom, I need you to know, I'm sorry. I'm so desperately sorry. And I'm grateful you survived. Grateful you stopped Derek before he could hurt anyone else. Grateful that even though I tried to destroy you, you're out there doing good, building something that helps people. You always were the stronger one. I love you. I'll always love you, even though I know that's not enough. Simone. I'd cried then, holding that letter, mourning the daughter I'd lost and the relationship we'd never rebuild, but I hadn't written back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some wounds ran too deep for words to heal. 2 years and 4 months after Simone pushed me into the Pacific, I stood on the deck of the Phoenix Rising, the yacht formerly known as Artemis, renamed and reclaimed, watching the California coast disappear behind us. The ocean was calm today, glittering under September sun, the air smelling like salt and possibility. 6 women stood with me on that deck, all of us survivors, all of us scarred by predators who'd thought we'd be easy targets. There was Margaret Sullivan, who I'd saved from Anthony Corso, Patricia Reeves, our first foundation case, Isabelle Laurent, who'd flown in from Paris specifically for this trip, and 3 others, women whose stories were different, but whose pain was the same. To survival, Margaret said, raising her glass of champagne, and to Victoria, who taught us we're stronger than we knew. We toasted under blue sky, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not quite peace, but something close. Acceptance, maybe. Understanding that what had happened to me, as terrible as it was, had led me here, to this work, to these women, to purpose larger than personal pain. Tell us the story again, Patricia asked. The night they pushed you. So I did. Told them about the drugged champagne, about Simone's whispered words, about hitting cold water and deciding to fight. Told them about the GPS tracker that saved my life, about Marcus coordinating rescue, about surviving long enough for the helicopter to find me. I was treading water in the middle of the Pacific, sedatives pulling me down, and I laughed, I said, because they'd underestimated me so completely. They thought I was just some rich old lady they could dispose of. They forgot I'd survived 20 years of intelligence work, forgot I'd planned for contingencies they couldn't imagine. What was the worst part? Isabel asked quietly. I thought about that, realizing my daughter hated me enough to kill me, that all the years I'd spent loving her, raising her, providing for her, none of it mattered in the end. She saw me as an obstacle to wealth rather than as her mother. The women were quiet, each processing their own versions of that betrayal. Margaret's boyfriend who'd drained her accounts, Patricia's who'd threatened her, Isabel's who'd planned her murder. Do you ever wish you'd stayed dead? One of the other women, Lydia, a former lawyer whose son had tried to have her declared incompetent to steal her estate, asked, let them think they'd won, instead of fighting? Never, I said immediately. Because staying dead would mean they got away with it, would mean Derek was still out there targeting other women, would mean Simone never faced consequences, and it would mean I'd never have started the foundation, never helped any of you, never turned my survival into something meaningful. Do you think she regrets it? Margaret asked. Your daughter? I think she regrets getting caught. Whether she truly regrets trying to kill me, I don't know. Maybe. But regret doesn't undo damage. Have you visited her? Patricia asked. No. Will you? I looked out at the ocean, the same ocean that was supposed to be my grave. I don't know. Part of me wants to see if there's anything left of the daughter I loved, or if she was always the person who could push her mother overboard. But another part of me thinks some doors, once closed, should stay closed. Isabel moved to stand beside me at the railing. I visit Derek's grave, she said quietly. Not the actual grave. He's not dead yet, unfortunately. But I visit the place where he tried to take me sailing, where I believe he would have killed me if I hadn't paid him to leave, and I tell him he lost, that I'm alive and thriving and he's in prison. It helps. Maybe I'll visit Simone, I said, someday, when I'm strong enough to see her without breaking. You're already strong enough, Isabel said. You survived drowning, testified at trial, built a foundation that saved dozens of women. Victoria, if you're not strong enough, none of us are. We sailed for 3 days, these women and I, sharing stories and strategies. We talked about how to spot financial predators, how to protect assets, how to trust again after betrayal. We cried and laughed and planned. On the final night, anchored off Catalina Island, we held a ceremony. Each woman brought something that represented her old life, the life before she'd been targeted, before she'd fought back, before she'd survived. Margaret brought a photograph of herself with Anthony Corso, looking happy and deceived. Patricia brought the fake investment documents her boyfriend had used to steal her money. Isabel brought a scarf Derek had given her, claiming it belonged to his dead mother, later discovered to have belonged to Marie Beaumont. I brought the shark tooth I'd gift-wrapped for Simone and Derek, the joke that had never been delivered. One by one, we threw our objects into the Pacific and spoke our truths. I survived. I'm stronger than they knew. I refused to be a victim. I chose myself. When it was my turn, I held that shark tooth up to moonlight and thought about everything it represented. The predators who'd tried to consume me, the daughter who'd fed me to them, the version of myself who'd gone into that water, and the version who'd emerged. Say hi to the sharks, I whispered, echoing Simone's words. But I'm not one of them anymore. I'm the one the sharks couldn't kill. I threw the tooth as far as I could, watched it disappear into dark water, and felt, finally, something like freedom. The letter from Simone arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 years after she'd pushed me into the ocean. I almost threw it away unopened. I'd thrown away dozens before, but something made me pause, made me sit at my kitchen table with coffee and morning light, and finally read what my daughter had to say. Mom, I know you haven't responded to any of my letters. I understand why. I've spent 3 years in prison thinking about what I did, who I was, who I'm trying to become. I've done therapy, education programs, victim impact work. None of it changes what happened. None of it earns your forgiveness. But I need to tell you something I learned. Derek contacted me from prison, through another inmate, through networks I don't fully understand. He wanted me to know that he never loved me, that I was always just a tool to access your fortune, that he'd planned to kill me the day after your money cleared into our accounts. I knew that, intellectually. You told me at the trial. But hearing it from him directly, reading his words explaining how stupid I'd been, how easy I'd been to manipulate, it broke something in me. or maybe it broke something in me loose. I helped him try to murder my mother because I was jealous and weak and easily manipulated, but I'm not that person anymore. Prison changes you. Loss changes you. Understanding that you were almost responsible for your mother's death changes you. I don't expect a relationship. I don't expect visits or phone calls or forgiveness. But Mom, if you could do one thing for me, know that I'm grateful you survived. Grateful you stopped Derek. Grateful that even though I tried to destroy you, you're out there in the world doing good. You were always the stronger one. I'm trying to become strong too. Maybe someday I'll be half the woman you are. I love you. I'll always love you. Simone. I read the letter 3 times, then set it down and looked out at the Pacific. From my kitchen window, I could see waves rolling in eternal rhythm, neither forgiving nor punishing, just existing in their ancient dance. Marcus found me there an hour later. You okay? I showed him the letter. He read it silently, then looked at me. What are you going to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to respond, to engage, to try to rebuild something. But Marcus, she tried to kill me. She pushed me into the ocean and sailed away. How do you forgive that? Maybe you don't, he said quietly. Maybe forgiveness isn't the goal. Maybe the goal is just acknowledging that you both survived this in different ways and moving forward without the weight of carrying all that anger. That sounds like something Dr. Kim would say. She's a smart woman. I thought about it for days. Drafted responses I never sent. Imagined conversations we might have. Reconciliations that felt both necessary and impossible. Finally, I wrote back. Not a long letter, just 3 sentences. Simone, I'm glad you're working on becoming someone you can be proud of. I hope you succeed. Maybe someday we'll talk. Mom, I mailed it before I could change my mind. 2 weeks later, the foundation hosted its annual gala, a fundraiser that drew donors, survivors, and advocates from across the country. We'd helped 247 women in 3 years, recovered over $180 million in stolen assets, assisted in prosecuting 31 predators. I stood at the podium in a ballroom filled with people who understood what it meant to survive, to fight back, to refuse to be erased. 3 years ago, I said, my daughter and her husband tried to kill me for my money. They drugged me, pushed me off my yacht, and sailed away thinking I'd drown. And for a few minutes, treading water alone in the Pacific, I thought they might be right. I thought about how easy it would be to just stop swimming, to let the ocean take me. The room was silent. But I didn't stop swimming, because I'd survived 20 years of dangerous work, because I'd built a company from nothing, because I'd lived long enough to know that being underestimated is sometimes your greatest advantage. They thought I was just some old woman they could dispose of. They forgot I was also a survivor, a fighter, someone who'd faced worse than them and won. I paused, looking out at faces that reflected my own journey. This foundation exists because I survived, because I decided that my near death wouldn't just be a personal tragedy, it would be transformed into protection for others. Every woman we help, every predator we stop, every life we save, that's my revenge. That's how I answer the question Simone whispered to me. Say hi to the sharks. I smiled. I did say hi, and the sharks said hi back, but they didn't eat me. And now I'm here, using everything I learned in that ocean to make sure fewer women end up in similar waters. The room erupted in applause. I saw tears, saw recognition, saw the faces of women who understood survival wasn't pretty or simple or complete. It was just the choice to keep going despite everything. After the gala, I returned to the Phoenix Rising. Tomorrow, we'd sail again. Another group of survivors. Another journey toward healing. But tonight, I stood alone on the deck where Simone had pushed me, where I'd almost died, where everything had changed. I thought about my daughter in her prison cell, working on becoming better, about Derek in his cell, dying alone and unmourned, about the women I'd saved and the ones I couldn't reach in time, about the shark tooth at the bottom of the Pacific and the GPS tracker still embedded in my shoulder, about the person I'd been before that night, a grieving widow, a controlling mother, someone who'd built empires but couldn't build connection with her own child, and about the person I'd become after, a survivor, an advocate, someone who'd transformed attempted murder into a movement. I pulled out my phone and took a photo. The deck, the ocean, the stars beginning to appear. Sent it to Simone's prison email with a single line. The view from where you pushed me. Still standing, still swimming. She'd see it eventually. Maybe she'd respond. Maybe she wouldn't. But I'd sent it not for her, for me. To prove that I'd survived not just physically, but emotionally. That I could look at the place where I'd almost died and feel power instead of fear. The ocean whispered against the hull, eternal and indifferent. I raised my glass of champagne, the same brand Derek had drugged 3 years ago, reclaimed and repurposed like everything else in my life. To the sharks who didn't eat me, I said to the empty deck, to the night, to myself, and to the predators who learned too late. Some women don't drown, we swim. The waves rolled on, the stars burned bright. And I sailed forward into a future I'd built from the wreckage of family that should have loved me but chose money instead. They'd tried to bury me at sea. I'd risen a phoenix instead. And that was enough. That was everything. Thank you very much for watching. Share with those who also like stories, subscribe, and tell me in the comments if you liked my story. Cheers.